Welcome to the Magic of Positive Thinking, a podcast hosted by Norb Svanascini, founder of AmericanEagle.com, and senior content writer Al Edwards. Norb, happy spring.
Happy spring and happy day. It's the magic of being alive and seeing what a beautiful day it is, this present that we get every day. It's
Absolutely.
a gift. So
Never get tired of saying that or hearing it.
Never tired of it. It's just wonderful. Yeah.
So, friends, you may recognize our voices, but you may be looking at your dial that you tuned into our podcast and realize that, hey, wait a minute. I thought this was the People Don't Think Let's Start Today podcast, and it is. It's your old friends Norb and Al, but we decided to, as they call it today, rebrand our podcast and name it something that we felt was a little more near and dear to our hearts as how the show has evolved. So, Norb, what was the idea behind the magic of positive thinking? Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, the site was called, obviously, People Don't Think, which is kind of negative, even if it's true. And I think that if we look at positive thinking about being magical, I think it's actually much more of a realistic way to look at it, because it is magical. And we talk a lot about miracles in this show, and that everything's a miracle. You can even look at it that way. And again, to quote Einstein, you can look at life as nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle.
Right.
But miracles are magical. So by thinking positive, I think that we can create this magic ability to look at life as, my God, look at this, look at that, and have a wonder about it, have a childlike wonder, which is what we all should strive for.
Never lose or work on gaining that sense of wow about life. Yeah. So we thought today's episode, in this special episode of our renaming of our podcast, and don't worry, everybody, all of our old podcasts are still going to be available on YouTube and wherever you get your local podcasts. So nothing's going away, but we just thought it would be fun to kind of change up the title a little bit. So with that said, we're going to actually talk about, does positive thinking actually work? And we're going to define the word work, because I think there's a lot of myths that if you just sit on your keister all day and think good things, that things are all kinds of good things are going to happen. And I think there's also a myth that positive people don't get down or discouraged or depressed, and nothing could be further from the truth. Our whole point is that if you stay on the positive road, you're going to be so much better in life. And I always bring up the flat tire analogy that you love, Norb, right? You get a flat tire, you pull over, it's a bummer, you change a tire, you get back on the highway, and everything's okay.
Absolutely. And again, that sitting goes back to also the secret of success is to remember that Spanish painter Goya.
Right.
And, get off and it's not ankle. And
or
basically,
Albuquerque.
That's the first step in actually, having a good life, being successful in whatever you do in life.
Absolutely. So let's start out, friends, by defining what actually is positive thinking. And I really like this because I think there's a lot of confusion about it. And what do you think about this, Norb? Positive thinking does not mean you stick your head in the sand or view the world through rose-colored glasses. Positive thinking encompasses the mental attitude of optimism, which searches for favorable outcomes in all situations. It relies on the emotional state of hope, which looks past current circumstances and supports the building of emotional, social, and other resources for positive action. I think that's a great definition.
Absolutely. And, it's kind of interesting because, again, we always say this, Al and I never know what we're going to talk about. And I had some ideas that really, it's incredible how it fits into this. And the one person that I wanted to talk about today, which actually fits into what Al just said, is J. Paul Getty. And I don't know if many people today know about J. Paul Getty. But J. Paul Getty was at one time the richest man in the world, and he didn't start as a wealthy man at all. He actually was a guy that actually became an oil magnate.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part about J. Paul Getty is that, first of all, one of the things that it impressed me a lot about the gentleman is that even after he became very wealthy, he had a situation where he was in a motel in Texas at one time. And the way he describes it is that it was 2 a.m. and he reached for his cigarettes. And they were gone. He didn't have any more. And there was a torrential rain in Texas. And he describes this so he's been all over the world and he's never seen rains like in Texas when they get these incredible rains. And he says he got in his car at 2 a.m. looking for a place that was open that sold cigarettes. And all of a sudden he said, my God, here I am, the richest man in the world, and I'm owned by a cigarette.
Wow.
So at that moment, he decided to quit smoking, come back to his motel, and he never touched a cigarette again.
Wow. How about that?
Which goes back to, the original title, People Don't Think. He thought that he didn't want to be controlled by the cigarette. And that's number one. I think that we all have these situations that we have to identify. What is the one thing that owns us that is not good for us? Why is it that, we're allowing something like that to control our thought or our actions? That's number one. Now, the other lesson about J. Paul Getty, which is really interesting, is that how he made his money. He didn't have much, but he observed that, in Texas especially, this is where he started his oil business. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of people that would hire these very, very knowledgeable and with incredible reputation geologists that would identify the areas where the oil would be under the ground. Now, of course, they weren't infallible, but obviously they really knew what they were doing. And then the people that hired these people also raised a amount of money. And let's say it was $100,000 just to have a figure. So they would go to the place where the geologist identified as having oil underneath, and they would drill until the $100,000 was gone. Mm-hmm. And then they would leave that spot. Now, J. Paul Getty's whole approach was just to dig a little deeper. And it's been recorded that he hit 2 feet after the drilling a few times.
Wow.
And it just gives you a great lesson in life that you shouldn't quit, which is also a sign of being positive. He knew that it was logical that there would be oil there because the people that said there would be oil were very well versed. And he also knew that you shouldn't quit in life. You should just keep drilling, even if of course, it's easy to say, well, they spent $100,000. Well, they should have maybe made a deal with J. Paul Getty,
right,
and said, look, I know you're going to keep drilling, so let's split this, or
give me
25%,
exactly.
Because he had to actually get the contract to keep drilling for this. So I think it's a great lesson to know that, first of all, you have to control your mind, see what really controls you. And again, it goes back to keeping, people that are pessimistic away from you.
Right.
And it doesn't have to actually be people. It could be cigarettes. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs. It could be many, many things. So the power of the mind is to say, I'm not going to do that anymore because it's not good for me.
I love that. There was a cartoon I saw years ago. I wish I could find it. It was a cartoon in a magazine, There was a fella. He had a mining pick. You know, those big picks that look like hammers, but they're big. And he's under the ground, and he's knocking at the rock, just knocking and knocking day after day. And the first picture of the cartoon shows him just going at it, and there's about 5 feet of wall still, and he's just dedicated. Nothing's going to stop him and all that kind of stuff. And the second one is the same scene, except the wall that he had whittled down to was literally about an inch thick, and he decides to leave because he can't take it anymore. And I never forgot that image, that he does all that work and he's an inch from breaking through, and he just walks away.
And that's very, very, very interesting that this is so common in life. We tend to give up before we really reach our goal, which is one of the things about The Strangest Secret, is that you should have some kind of a goal and just go for it, and don't let your mind beat you. The guys who stopped drilling for oil, or this guy with a rock, which, I think I've seen that cartoon, and it is true. It's true.
I'd love to find that somehow and put it in my office. I really love that. Yeah. Well, we've talked about so many guys on this podcast, Norb, but one of them, of course, is Henry Ford. And I just cannot get over the power of one of his most famous quotes. And he said, "People don't fail. They just stop trying." And my God, if you really sit down and think about that, it is about the most powerful thing you ever need to know about life.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting is that I don't know who said it, and we have to do some research on this, but one of the most common traits of humans is that they overcomplicate things.
Right.
And, one of the, I was just listening to a few things, like Al and I always, keep always listening to positive guys that have been there for, some of them 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
But we like it because it reinforces our thought pattern, which is something I recommend to everybody. There was a really, really famous guy that was on PBS for many years, and we mentioned him before, Leo Buscaglia. He was just a phenomenal guy. Had a class on love and how you should love people and be happy. And he used to say, we all have experiences that we should be happy about. He says, if you have an experience, just look at it as, my God, what an experience. And he talked about things about, in the fall, he would see tree leaves in piles, and he would just fall on those pile of leaves and say, God, what a feeling. And I says, I pity anybody who hasn't had that feeling, And you should enjoy things in life like that. But one of the things he said, which is very, very important, is that you have to realize what's important in life and be able to say, that's important and that isn't important, because we dwell on a lot of unimportant, meaningless things in life. And, just look at, is that really important? You get mad at somebody because they don't put their turn light on, and you get mad. You say, that idiot didn't put his turn light on. It's really not that important. Just ignore it, and just be more careful. Don't get obsessed with things that are not really important. I think that makes a big difference in life.
I love that. There's an expression they say, don't get bedazzled by the urgent, or don't get caught up into the urgent, but get caught up into what's important.
Exactly. And he says, the other thing is what's essential in life and non-essential. And things that are essential, like eating well, let's say, are important.
Mm-hmm.
And things that are not essential, like what color socks you're wearing, just don't worry about it.
Right.
And just have that ability to tell the difference. Okay.
Absolutely. And friends, we mentioned a lot of different people on this show. And we're very proud. One of the most things we're proud of is that people who never knew who Earl Nightingale was, or Zig Ziglar, or Leo Buscaglia now know. So if you ever want to check out Leo Buscaglia, he was a beautiful man. He really was. As Norb said, he was all about love and living life and doing what's important. And there's a million YouTube videos on him. The other thing I want to mention is that I was just listening to Earl Nightingale this morning in my car. In addition to The Strangest Secret, which is our great recording, he put out something called Lead the Field, which originally was a 6 cassette tape seminar on basically expanding on all the topics that he talked about. So it went from cassette, then it went to CD, and I had the cassette and I had the CD, and now I have it on Audible on my phone. And I was just listening to Lead the Field, which is about 12 chapters of him talking about all these different things. So if you really want to dig more into this, I recommend Lead the Field. It's available on Audible. You can get it anywhere pretty much. So that's our old buddy, Earl Nightingale, still at it.
Yeah. And one of the things is that a lot of people talk about success stories, and a lot of people unluckily feel that, well, that I'm not that type of a person. I just couldn't do this. And this is a defeatist attitude that I think is very, very common today. And this is why we have so much so-called depression and anxiety. I was reading an article the other day that, the amount of depression and anxiety that young people identify with is just a ridiculous figure, almost approximating like 50%, which is nuts. And I'm going to give you 2 examples that happened this week. And I think I mentioned one young man that I know before, but I met him recently, and this is a young man who really went through a lot. I mean, he unluckily, became friends with the wrong crowd, and he at that time didn't realize it. And they had a big problem with drinking, and part of his life became drinking, and he drank and drank, and he never got trouble with the law, but he did get trouble with driving, and he got caught with driving under the influence, and had a lot of problems with that, and it got to the point where his drinking became life-threatening, and to the point that he actually wrote to his family and told them that, he had such damage that he wasn't expected to live.
Wow.
And that was like 5 years ago. And at that time, he actually decided that he wasn't going to drink anymore, and that whatever time he had left, he was just going to be doing the right thing, and had a family, and devoted his life to his family. Amazingly enough, this has been, I don't know, many, many years, 5, 6, and he's just a phenomenal young guy now, and he just decided that he wasn't going to continue doing this thing that was harming him, which is just phenomenal, and whoever's listening and they're going through this type of period, just make up your mind that you're not going to do this anymore. Identify what's hurting you and just don't do it. Going back to Paul Getty, he just thought, my God, this cigarettes owns me. I'm not going to let it.
Right.
And, he was alone. This is the most interesting part about it. He was in a motel alone. He didn't have family around him or anything like that. And a very interesting guy. Very thrifty, by the way. He had one of the biggest homes in England when he was alive. And one of the things that bothered him is that he would invite very wealthy people there, very influential, and they would use his phone to make long distance calls. So he got so upset about that he installed a pay phone.
Oh my gosh!
In this mansion, so people would not abuse his goodness. So that made him happy, and I'm not saying you should do that. Obviously, today with a incredible advancement in phones, you can make a phone call for nothing,
right?
All over the world. So, but it's kind of interesting.
That is so funny. I was just saying this the other day. I remember a time when if you wanted to get off the phone with somebody, you would say, "I've got a call coming in long distance." And if you were talking long distance, everything else in your world had to stop.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that concept today is so ridiculous. Like you just said, that doesn't exist anymore. You can call anywhere in the world for pennies.
Well, this is kind of interesting that we talked about the phone, because I just thought about this, which is interesting. But, we have become so much of a slave to that phone today, that you talk about something to get rid of. I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't get rid of your phone. I mean, I obviously, I have one and it also, but I think that it might not be a bad thing to just turn it off once in a while and just forget it, because you go to restaurants and everybody's on that phone, kids, adults, and God, you talk about something that owns you.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. And I think that probably is just as bad as anything that has ever existed, ever. Which is kind of, I try to do it really, but when going back to J. Paul Getty, at that time making a long distance call was really a lot of work. I mean, it was
right.
For you people that are not old, and if you traveled outside of the United States, they used to have actually places where you'd go, and these were big places with multiple booths, sometimes like 100 booths. Mm-hmm. And they had a central person who would decide who gets the next phone ability to make a long distance call, and it was an ordeal. It was expensive as all get out. That's how I used to make a long distance call.
Yeah,
so that's another thing we have to be happy about, all the improvements that have happened in our life to make our lives easier. But of course, by making it easier, it also puts a burden on you, because if today, if somebody doesn't call you back within 5 minutes, you're just upset.
Bent out of shape.
Yeah. So, yeah.
This whole idea of your phone, looking at your phone versus living the experience of life. I'll never forget this. I saw a photograph. There was a group of people, and they were all clearly looking at something exciting going on. And every one of them had their phone out. They were taking a picture or filming this event, and there was 20 people in this photo, and everyone had their phone, and you could see their phone being held. In the corner of the picture, there was an older lady, and she was very peacefully smiling and actually looking at the event and experiencing it rather than trying to capture it on her phone. And I felt that moment was very poignant, because it showed the difference between actually experiencing life and taking something in and having to record it on your phone and be crazy and all that other kind of stuff. And it was really a powerful image for me.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, the analogy. I just thought about another analogy. It's almost like food. You see people in this country, and obviously you can read about it, that the obesity problem is just horrendous.
Obesity is widespread.
Yes, it is. And what's interesting is that whenever you have all these pictures in your phone, and it's funny because somebody is always trying to have me look at a picture they had about something, and they have to scroll through these thousands of pictures on the phone, and most of the time they can't even find it, okay? Because there's so much of it. And when you look at the analogy with food, you see this obesity. It's hard today not to eat,
right?
Because we're blessed with having such plentiful food, which 100 years ago this didn't exist. People, today they just don't realize that you go to a supermarket and there's all this food. And I was foreign born. When I came to this country, the one thing my parents did when somebody came over from another country is take them to a grocery store to show all the food that was in America.
But that was an incredible novelty for people to see.
Oh, yeah, because that didn't exist.
Right.
It didn't exist.
Right.
You went to and I remember being a kid and going, not in this country, to different shops for the vegetable and different shops for the meat. And it was a chore. I mean, and usually it was done by, the wife, the ladies. And going shopping on a daily basis was work, because you had to go and you didn't have frozen foods. So, they had to be by every day. And the bread, you had to go to the bread store. And this was planning for the meal was a big, big job. Today, nobody does that. I mean, well, I'm sure some people do, but, it's
right.
just not a common thing.
Right.
So having too much and having the ability to control your mind to not abuse that quantity of whatever you might have is also something that, it's you have to think about,
Yeah, and I want to go back to your friend that you were talking about who found himself, immersed in alcoholism and what he was doing to his life. And you said something very important, and that is he made a decision to change his life. And I have a little bit of personal experience in that, as Norb knows, I was very, very heavy for most of my life. And I got
fat, Al.
Or fat, yeah.
Yeah.
I like to say heavy, but fat is the operative word. And it got to the point in my 50s that I was actually in really bad trouble health-wise. I was really, because youth was, evading me. And some very bad things were starting to happen to me health-wise. And a number of years ago, I made a decision, and that's the key, a decision, that I no longer wanted to live that way. And I always talk about it. I'm sure your friend could relate to this. When the emotional pain of living a certain way was more than my willingness to change, it finally happened. And I always want to say, people can decide one day at a time to change their lives. And I wound up losing over 40 pounds. I completely turned my metabolic numbers all around. I started running when I was 55 years old. I ran over 100 miles last year. I never used to run anywhere before. I used to run to Portillo. It's a local hot dog place. That's where I would usually run if a new Portillo's opened. The only problem with running is I ran 100 miles last year, but no one told me I should go back. So it turns out I was 100 miles away from home. Right. But all kidding aside, my point is, friends, is that this gentleman that Norbert's talking about, and also in my own life, if you decide one day at a time, and there's power in doing something one day at a time, they say that minutes turn into hours, hours turn into days, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and months turn into years. And next thing you know, you've got the life that you want.
Yeah. And, it's hard. Don't think for 1 minute that these are easy decisions. I mean, and I've known Al all my life. And truthfully, I used to tell him, my God, Al, you better watch it, because obviously his love for food was a problem. And just like the phone is a problem. I mean, people are just immersed with this thing about having to look at that phone continuously. So, I was driving this weekend. I drove quite a bit, and there was a lady driving a huge SUV one of the real big ones. And she was doing 80 miles an hour. I know because I was next to her on the phone. She was on the phone and holding it out, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, if this lady would have an accident or something in front of her would happen, and you don't know how much you travel going 80 miles an hour, per second.
Right.
It's just incredibly about. This woman could have called, hurt herself, people in the car if she had any, I didn't see, and other people,
right?
Because she had to look at something in that phone. And we talk about the miracle of positive thinking, the magic of positive thinking is that when you actually make a choice of not to do that anymore. I mean, when you have your phone in the car, don't look at that phone. Most phones today are equipped for Bluetooth anyway in your car. You don't even have to look at your phone if you want to make a call. You just say, call, Georgia, or the phone will be there. So you don't even have to look at it. But, what does this have to do with magic of positive mental attitude? Well, the magic is that if you don't look at the phone, you can enjoy the view like this lady that Al was talking about. And my God, you keep that in your brain, which is also has an incredible amount of photographic memory, instead of having to look through thousands of irrelevant and ridiculous photographs you take today in excess. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I always like to end the show with one thing you said kind of off the cuff a few shows ago. And, we talked about today, does positive thinking work? And there's a lot of studies that actually show it does work. It reduces anxiety. It improves your metabolism. It improves your immune system. It helps minimize depression, things of that nature. But I want to leave everyone with this thought that Norb said a few shows ago. Does positive thinking work? Yes, it does. Optimism works. But what's the alternative?
Exactly.
What's the alternative to positive thinking? And the alternative, friends, is being miserable.
Yes, exactly.
And everything else that goes wrong with being miserable. So work on optimism, work on positivity, make a decision one day at a time to change your life. And I think we're all going to be much better off.
Yeah, because, again, and I'm glad I mentioned it, and Al liked it. A few things he likes.
No, once in a while, I like things Norb says. But.
No, I mean, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? I mean, just be happy. If you feel depressed or something like that, go out and look at a little bird. I think we said this in like the third podcast we did. And I was looking at a little bird this week again. And they're just amazing little things. They have a digestive system and a heart, and I mean, my God, what a miracle! And it's just, I just hope if anybody gets something out of this, a few people, Al and I'm sure we'll be very happy we do this because it really, people. It really works. You think positive and good things will happen. And I want to say one thing, which is probably just as important as anything else. It's a proven scientific fact that people who think positive live 4 years more than people who don't. So why the heck don't do it?
Right.
Yeah.
And we also said that the same thing is for exercise. People who exercise live 4 years longer. So you said one time, just think positively. It's a lot easier than exercising.
Absolutely.
You don't have to buy a special outfit.
Exercise your brain to be positive. The rest of the body will apply the same happiness to itself as if you exercise.
You don't even need a special outfit to think positive like you do to exercise.
No.
You're saving money, friends, right there. Well, we hope that you have followed us on our tangents that we did today. We always tend to do a little bit of a stream of consciousness. A lot of people tell us that they enjoy it. We hope you enjoyed this show. And just go out there and decide what you want to do with your life one day at a time. think optimistically, and I'm willing to bet that you're going to get where you want to be one day at a time. So, Norb, thank you as always.
And thank you, Earl. And just do 3 things today that will make you happy. Pick up that little piece of paper, say hello to somebody, have a good day. Little things, 3 things, and believe me, it'll make you feel better.
I'll never forget a sign in your office. It's a smile. It's contagious.
Absolutely.
So, Norb, thank you. Well, friends, we'll see you next time. This is Al Edwards for Norb Svanascini, and have a great day, and we'll see you on our next show. Thank you.